I cannot believe I actually have to say this. If a masked person with a knife is rushing you and you have a gun, shoot them. Welcome back, horror fans. I'm Leo, and Bootube Breakdowns is here to save your scary movie night. Right off the bat, Night of the Reaper scores a 4.8 out of 10, landing it in our zombie stumble category. But here's the thing. I've already had to find the time to do my makeup so that I look like a skeleton while a serial killer was chasing me, just to get you this score. And in a few minutes, I'll show you exactly why this film earned its rating. If you disagree with my score at the end of the video, be sure to let me know how much you want to go into a fit of rage and attack a teenager while in a police interrogation room. Okay, and then be sure to like, share, and subscribe about it in the comment section. We start with a teenager getting slaughtered by a killer in a skeleton mask, and this sets up the story. We cut to a small town sheriff with a tragic past, Rodney, trying to investigate the whole thing. Before we know it, another teenager who is back in town from college, Dina, gets a gig babysitting Rodney's kid, and wouldn't you know it, the killer shows up. While this is happening, in the background, Rodney is getting tapes labeled Night of the Reaper, roll credits I guess, and the tapes show how the killer is conducting these brutal murders. The sheriff does some sheriffing, takes in a local kid, Chad, for questioning, but turns out he's the wrong kid. Until he wasn't. Yeah, it's a little contrived, but stay with me for a second. Plot twist, Dina is the older sister of Emily, the girl who got killed in the beginning of the movie, and she's now laid a trap to catch the killer in the act. Plot happens, the killer is captured and revealed to be Officer Elizabeth, who works in the sheriff's office, and right before the girl is going to kill the killer, she gets smacked in the head and knocked out from behind by Chad. Oh, by the way, Elizabeth also killed the sheriff's wife. Just throwing that out there. Anyways, it turns out that Chad and Elizabeth are a killer duo where she kills and he films. More plot happens. Chad has his head blown off by a bomb in his camera. Seriously, don't think about it. And right before Elizabeth is about to win, Rodney shows up, kills Elizabeth, and conspires with Dina to cover up the murder. And that's the story of Night of the Reaper. The story here is a callback to classic 80s slasher films. Set in the 80s with the same clothing, mannerisms, language, and in some parts even video quality. Honestly, it is a Temu version of 1996's Scream with a twist. It's not a bad movie in practice, and I wasn't really bored watching it. It's just kind of a basic horror movie. The twist where the hunter becomes the hunted is always a welcome twist for these movies, and I love the reveal of the meticulous planning that was taken by Dina before that twist happens. Rodney's entire plotline, however, was meant to humanize him, but ultimately it kind of makes him irrelevant to the story, except for the very ending, and I'll get to that. Chad and Willis's storyline as small-town friends with Dina would have been interesting to explore, but ultimately go nowhere, and could have been written off entirely with no consequences to the story. Also, the whole Dina had a tragic backstory in this town was definitely hinted at in the very beginning, but since it wasn't touched again until the twist, by the time it happened I'd already forgotten that part, and it bore no emotional impact whatsoever. The best description I could give for the whole affair is this is a snack horror movie for when you are having a horror movie craving but don't want to get too invested in a movie. It's nothing special, and it is kind of fun, but again, very middle of the road slasher movie. Scoring for this one is going to get a 5 out of 10. I found myself coming back to the scene in Scream where they do a breakdown of the formula of how horror movies and slasher films by extension are supposed to operate. With minor differences here and there, the movie pretty much followed that formula to a T. I don't want to spend too much time on this section because it really truly was a copy-paste slasher film. I'm going to give this pacing a middle of the road 5 out of 10. The horror for this one is actually rather tame, even for a 1980s style slasher film. The introduction shows the Reaper as a potentially sadistic killer that plays with their victim by leaving notes and moving portraits from the walls to the ground and creating a trail behind Emily, which, first off, rude. However, as the film goes more in the direction of murder mystery and away from the survival slasher horror side of things, we kind of forget about the brutality of the killer. Yeah, even with all the killer tapes that we see through Rodney's perspective, I feel like the film took too much time with the character's backstory rather than actually focusing on the main goal of the horror movie, which of course is to scare you. As it all plays out, the tension is broken entirely through cheap scares in every direction. The thing that was weird is that since they were so predictable, they didn't even come off as cheap scares, just noises that maybe my headphones made at the right time. Ultimately, the best I can give in the fear score for this film is a 3 out of 10. Okay, so now for the redeeming factor. The movie was actually a fun watch. The acting from the characters was a little over the top and exaggerated to the point that it was kind of charming to watch. I wouldn't call it bad acting exactly, more like overacting. It was a subtle way of understanding that the actors still came here to do their jobs, but they were clearly having a lot of fun with this in the background and knew to not take it too seriously. The twist with Dina was actually a fun way to break the monotony of such a predictable movie, and it kept my interest going just as it was starting to die off. However, the part that I did not expect with this one was the conspiracy at the end of Rodney and Dina to hide the evidence for the killing of Elizabeth and Chad. The reveal of how Dina was the one sending Rodney the tapes in order to get him to the killer was definitely on the fun side of the story once all is said and done. If you're looking for a simple little horror movie to satisfy that horror itch without demanding that you think too much about it, I would definitely say this one ticks those boxes. As I already described this is kind of a snack horror movie. Fun factor gets a 6 out of 10. Now this one had one of those by the script type of endings. The reveal that Dina had been sending Rodney the tapes all along was kind of interesting, if not for the overly contrived line of dialogue in which Dina says that she did this so Rodney can be here and get justice for the murder of his wife. The conspiracy turns out to be an act between the two of them that neatly ties the loose ends with a bow. Chad's body, remember him, blown off head and all, is discovered in Elizabeth's house. There's a funeral, and everyone is crying up until the last second where Dina smiles at the casket as Elizabeth is lowered into a hole, and then the screen fades to black. I'm sure there's going to be no loose ends here to reconcile, like how Rodney's partner, Butch Cassidy, yes, that's his name, 80s reference, who's an overly zealous by-the-book cop, is going to react to the circumstances. Willis's plotline is basically non-existent, but what happens now since his best friend Chad, who was involved in the case, and Rodney decided to turn Willis's face into a Pollock painting while being interrogated? Are we gonna gloss over that? Also, what about Hattie, who was supposed to be babysitting Rodney's son before Dina took her shift? We're not going to discuss Hattie's murder? Okay, I guess. Ultimately, the ending here has more holes than Swiss cheese, but the point isn't to have a good ending. The point is to have a dead killer and end the movie with Blue Oyster Cult's Don't Fear the Reaper, damn it. I honestly couldn't help but laugh at that ending. It's so cliche and an almost charming callback to how silly horror movies in the 80s were. Just like everything else, this ending is just as middle of the road a copy-paste ending as pretty much all movies of that era. I give the ending here a 5 out of 10. So that's Bootube Breakdowns' take on Night of the Reaper. Averaging our scores gives this movie a 4.8 out of 10, which places it in our zombie stumble category. Do you agree with my rating? Scream your score in the comments and tell me what horror flick I should get next. If this saved your spooky vibes, smash that like, share with your horror crew, hit that notification bell, and subscribe to Bootube Breakdowns for more killer verdicts. Keep it creepy, and I'll haunt you in the next review.